Michelle helps couples and families find healing and peace in the face of disconnection, trauma, infidelity, betrayal, poor communication, grief, and sexual issues. She's trained in emotionally focused therapy, also known as EFT, which is a research-based approach to help couples and families break negative patterns, explore emotion, and develop lasting closeness. She's also trained in EMDR, which is an effective intervention for mild to severe trauma, and has received advanced training in treating infidelity and betrayal trauma. Michelle also runs a popular Instagram account at The Right Fit Therapy to help connect couples to each other. So tonight, Michelle's webinar is titled Emotional Boundaries in Marriage, where she will be helping you see the importance of taking ownership of your emotions and allowing your significant other to do the same. Understand how to support your partner while not taking on their stuff. Learn how to better regulate your emotional experience by understanding your nervous system. Explore the paradox of what it means to be securely dependent in your relationship, and experience how to co-regulate with your partner. There will be an anonymous Q&A session for the final 15 minutes of this 1-hour webinar. So hold your questions for the end during that portion. However, Michelle will be asking you to participate through the chat. She'll have a couple exercises for you to do, and would like to see some participation in the chat when she asks, when she cues you. And then also this workshop is approved for 1 continuing education credit. So you can email me at marriagecommission@usu.edu to request a certificate. Okay, thank you so much, Michelle, for being here. And I'm so excited to hear from you. And yeah, I'll let you get started.
All right, thank you so much, Camilla. I am just so thrilled to be here tonight with you all. Camilla gave such a good introduction. I just kind of want to tack on to that, so yes, I see mostly couples and adult individuals. I've been married for 17 years, and I have 3 kids, ages 14, 12, and almost 9. So I love helping people with their relationships, because I believe that, as you'll see tonight, that I'm a big believer in the power of connection. And by that, what I mean is connection to self, to others, to a higher power. And that I think that, you know, what ails so much of us as humans is when we feel so separate. And I believe that we are the best versions of ourselves when we're connected to each other. So, but we'll get more into that. So let me go ahead and just start by sharing my screen. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. Okay. So just want to give you a heads up that tonight I'll be using like interchangeable terms like partner, spouse, significant other, marriage, partnership. And just to let you know, in general, I'll be referring to a committed romantic relationship. So let me start by just kind of setting the table, let you know where we're headed tonight. So my thoughts will be focused on the role of emotion in relationships, as well as the importance of emotional boundaries and how to regulate our emotions in a way that keeps us connected to ourselves and to others. So we'll start by talking about what are emotions. Then we'll talk about how we're hardwired for both self-protection and connection. We'll dive a little bit into nervous system polyvagal theory, and we'll discuss emotion regulation and what are emotional boundaries to answer that question, and understand how having healthy emotional boundaries can help us be more compassionate toward ourselves and our partners, and then have you co-regulate with your partner and have that experience. Okay, so emotion. Emotion is our very first language. So think of a pre-verbal baby. They have no problem getting their message across and getting their needs met by attentive caregivers, and they don't have any sort of communication or language abilities. Emotion is centered in the body and is focused on survival and fulfilling needs. It can be seen as a compass in life because, you know, we often talk about our intuition, and our intuition is like in our gut, where many of the emotions are centered. I'm sorry, my lights just got turned off. Alexa, turn on lights. There we go, we're back. So it can be a compass in life. Also, emotion prepares us to act when we're faced with a perceived reality or a perceived threat. And emotions, this is something that I really like to highlight. Emotions are impermanent. They pass like the weather. And some people describe them as wave-like. So they kind of come and go. They crest and then they fall. And I know that's how I experience them. So more about emotion. Emotion is more of a process than a thing. So actually, rather than saying, I am happy or I am frustrated, it might be more appropriate to say, like, happiness is with me or frustration is upon me, which is actually how people talk about emotion in other languages often, but it might sound kind of silly to us. But I hope you can hear the difference. The latter implies some sort of separation, because sometimes we get stuck when we identify too heavily with an emotion, because that doesn't highlight the impermanent nature. So let's talk about the process of emotion. We'll kind of slice it thin and discuss the different parts. So it begins with a cue from the environment. As humans, we are always scanning and gathering information about our environment. After that, when we pick up the cue, our bodies react. There's some sort of sensation in the body. And depending on the cue, our body will respond differently. We might feel a little bit more on edge, like if somebody gives us a weird look, or we might feel like our chest expand when we see our kids playing together. And then it's at that point that our clunky brain kind of comes online and tries to make sense of what's going on with the cue and the body sensation. So the story might be, you know, oh no, is my fly down? They're looking at me weird, or they must not like me very much, or oh my gosh, she's such a brat, right? Or the story with the body sensation of watching your kids and your chest expanding might be, I'm so grateful for my life, or gosh, I just really love my kids. And then we have the action tendency. This is where the behavior comes. This is when we act on our emotions. So for example, I might check my fly if I'm worried my fly is down, or avert my eyes, or engage in conflict. Like, what are you looking at me like that for, right? Or with the example with your kids, your chest is expanding and you might say, oh, you know, I really want to reach for my kids, or give them a hug. You might say a little prayer of gratitude, or you might smile at your husband. And that entire process that we took just a few minutes to talk about actually takes less than 1/10 of a second. It's such a fast process. So here's a little bit about emotion and the brain. You actually have a lot in common with your dog and your mammalian part of your brain. So emotion is a function of the mammalian brain, which evolved after the reptilian brain. Mammals are social, meaning that their survival depends on being part of the pack. The emotion center of the brain developed to help mammals communicate with one another and strengthen their bonds. The newest part of our brain is the top part of our brain. It's the biggest part, the wrinkly part. That's the newest part, and developed, it added the ability for us to make meaning of things, to take on another person's perspective, to use language and use higher order thinking. So we have a number of pets at my house. We have a bunch of fish. My husband breeds fish. We have a couple of snakes, and we have a dog named Lucy. So Lucy and these other animals, I just get a real kick out of watching them. And I'm fascinated to see the difference between each of them. I wonder things like, why don't I feel like I want to cuddle with my snakes like I do with Lucy? I think it has something to do with the fact that Snaky McSnakeface is his name, has no interest in bonding with me. He doesn't have that part of his brain. His goal is survival, where Lucy, she has that those bonding hormones. She has that mammalian brain. And I actually took Lucy with our family to the dog park recently. And I just loved watching her integrate into that space, because she did so by keeping a close eye on us and then staying in really close proximity to us as she explored the new environment. She actually seemed really human to me that day. It almost seemed like, or it felt familiar to like a middle school lunchroom where those kids travel in packs, just like these dogs. They stick to the people, they stick to the animals that they know. So, right, so we have the reptilian brain. The goal is survival, and met with threat of death, the body automatically responds with the freeze and shut down response. And so that was one of the very first capacities of the brain to develop, is when animals freeze and shut down, they actually have hormones dump into their body that are painkillers and prepares them for death. It prepares them to be chomped on. So we have that part still in us. We still have this happen when we feel a threatened response. We have a response to threat. And sometimes we freeze, sometimes we shut down. So the mammalian brain, the goal is connection. Connection means being part of the pack and ensuring that we're safe together as a unit. And when there's a threat of danger, the automatic response is actually mobilization. It's fight, it's flight. And so that comes with the mammalian brain. And then, of course, most recently, we developed the higher brain, which allows us to take on others' perspectives. We have empathy for others, communicate nuanced needs. We can weigh out options, make sound decisions, and we feel more connected. So this is where safety and social connection live together. We want to be in our higher brain most of the time. We want to be in our higher brain. We want that part of us to be in the driver's seat as much as possible. Okay. So we are built, every human is built with an internal alarm system. So this is known as neuroception. It's responsible for scanning 3 streams of information: the body, our environment, and then the vibes we get from other people's nervous systems. The alarm system is concerned with only one thing, one question, and that question is, am I safe in this moment? And if the answer is no, then we enter a state of survival. So I'm going to show you a really helpful model of the brain. I'm not sure, you may have seen this before, but this is the hand model of the brain developed by Dan Siegel. And I don't know if you can see me, I'm kind of small, but the brain is this folded up fist where the cerebral cortex, which is right behind your forehead, that's the part, that's the higher brain. And so the eyes would be right in the front here. When we tuck our thumb underneath, that's the midbrain. So underneath the midbrain, that is the amygdala, that's the mammalian brain. And then low down on the palm, all the way at the bottom, that's the brain stem, or the reptilian brain. And so when your alarm system perceives a threat, the more primitive parts of the brain take over to protect you. That's their whole job, to make sure you're protected. And so what that looks like is your higher brain disconnects from your lower brain. And Dan Siegel calls this flipping your lid. So you no longer have access to reason, to taking on someone's perspective, to feeling compassion for other people. So this happens, flip your lid. And then the question is, now what? Now what do I do? When your lid is flipped, how do you bring your brain back into integration, where you have access to, when your higher brain is hugging and helping your midbrain and lower brain feel safe? So when your brain is hijacked by survival state, connection is the key. Connection integrates the brain. Connection with self and other is the key to regulating our emotions. So it's really helpful to pay attention enough to learn when your lid is starting to rattle and regulate yourself before the lid flies off completely, right? So if you are constantly waiting until you blow up to take care of your emotional state, it will take more time and more effort to get yourself back to a grounded state, not to mention all the repair work that needs to be done after the damage caused to your relationship. So remember, humans are social animals. Nervous systems are shaped by our earliest experiences. So this is just a note about attachment and how attachment affects our nervous system development. So if you had a secure and loving attachment where your needs were taken care of, you learned that relationships are safe, the world is generally good, and you can trust your internal experience. But if your attachments early in life were insecure, the nervous system adapts by becoming more hypervigilant. So your alarm gets more sensitive, ignoring your needs because you can't trust others to take care of you, and feeling shut off from your internal experience. It's like unplugging your alarm because it feels faulty, right? And so attachment affects how we respond, or how our nervous system responds to cues in the environment. Okay, so I'd now like to introduce you to a very helpful tool that I love to use with my clients. I use it personally often, maybe even daily. And this is a tool developed by Tara Brach that focuses on connecting to yourself as a way of regulating your emotions. So we use the acronym RAIN, R-A-I-N. So R stands for recognize. So this is when you notice, you're aware enough that something is going on inside of you, something is off. With the R, you recognize it by asking, what needs my attention most right now? What's trying to get my attention? When you are in this space, you pause. You notice what's happening inside your body. You do a body scan, figure out what's going on. And you can even place a hand where you feel that sensation. Allow, this is simply staying with whatever is there. This is allowing yourself to not get distracted and allow and say yes to what's there. We investigate. So this is when you start to get curious about your experience. You start kind of asking questions internally, letting things kind of speak to you. And then the final step is nurture. And this is when you offer yourself and this part that's coming up for you compassion. And you can do that from a place of your higher self, or you can call on a higher power to help. So at this point, I would like to invite you to try this out with me. So we're going to slow down, and I'm going to ask you and invite you to close your eyes and practice RAIN with me right here. So start by tuning into your breath. Notice what it's like to breathe in and out. You can start by scanning your body from the top of your head to your toes, looking for any areas that feel stuck, that feel tight. You can ask, what part of me needs my attention most right now? And notice if anything responds. When you find that place, see how it feels to put a hand where you feel the tension. Now that you've recognized that a part needs your attention, slow down here. Allow whatever is there to have some space. Say yes to it being here. If you notice yourself drifting away into thoughts or distraction, gently bring yourself back to the sensation. Now let that sensation have a voice. Try to name it. Is it anxiety, sadness? Is it anticipation, hope? Listen to what it has to say. And you can ask this part, what is this feeling about for me? Now send that part some compassion. Imagine wrapping it in your arms. And this can come from you, this compassion can come from you, or you can bring to mind a spiritual leader or a higher power and imagine them offering compassion to that part. Notice what happens to the tension. Wonderful. While you're in this space, take a few moments and reflect on what that was like for you. And then rejoin me here. So I'd like you to take a few minutes and reflect on what that was like for you. Your experience here is full of feedback and information for you. So if you have a notebook or a journal, you can take notes or maybe write some things down in your phone, or even better, if you're attending with your significant other, you can please share your experience with them. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through these questions and allow you to kind of reflect, like, what did it take for you to slow down? Was that difficult, or was that easy to slow down and to turn your attention inward? What sensations were you able to find in your body? Were you able to touch on those things? And just a note here that no sensation is a sensation. So even noticing that you didn't sense much inside your body works well here. What happened when you said yes to your experience rather than pushing it away or distracting yourself from it? How much space was inside of you to be curious about that part? how was it trying to name the feelings? That can be really tricky sometimes for people. How much compassion were you able to send this part of you? And who was the source of that compassion? And then how do you feel after this exercise? You notice more space? Are you relating to that part of you differently now? So like I mentioned earlier, emotion is a process of triggers, body response, thoughts, and behavior. All of that happened lightning fast. And then you put that, your experience parallel to your partner's experience, and things can start getting really mixed up and confusing and maybe a little bit of murky. And in marriage, it's common for coping behaviors of spouses to become emotional triggers for you. So I'll give you an example of this. So this is a couple, Taylor and Tina. So this is an example of a negative cycle that Taylor and Tina commonly get into that involves their emotions. So there's a trigger cue. And Taylor gets triggered when his partner uses a critical tone. And his nervous system responds because of the sensitivity to criticism, because there's a history of having a critical mother. So his nervous system is a little bit more sensitive to criticism. He fears, there's a great fear inside of him of disappointing his partner and then ultimately not being accepted. That's what's going inside for him when he's triggered. The story for him is, I can't get anything right? When my partner criticizes me, I believe I can't get anything right. And so what does he do? What does he do with all of this experience? The way that he copes is by not engaging, and he uses his phone as a distraction. So what happens then? Tina picks up on the coping behavior, and that becomes a cue that says that to her nervous system that is very sensitive to being ignored because of her history with her dad not being present. And so she has a sensitivity to being ignored. And when her husband uses his phone as a distraction, she picks up on that cue and fears not being understood and ultimately fears being abandoned. She believes my spouse doesn't even care. And her coping behavior is to tell her partner, hey, you're on your phone too much. And so here we are back in this cycle. So her coping behavior is to criticize her partner, and this continues or perpetuates the cycle. Now I want you to notice that both partners have a role here, right? We could have started with Tina and said she gets triggered when her partner's on her phone or on his phone, right? And so this cycle they both have a part in, and they both perpetuate this cycle that leads to them feeling very unsafe and disconnected from each other. So Taylor and Tina would benefit from having better emotional boundaries. So boundaries define where one thing ends and another begins. In marriage, there are three entities: you, me, and us. So it's very common for these boundaries to get blurred when people deeply care about each other. So blurred boundaries, some examples, it can look like partners blaming each other. This is your fault. This is your problem. Trying to fix the other person's problems, right? Rather than listening and being supportive. It can look like taking on too much responsibility or believing it's my fault. So I'm going to shoulder that burden, that burden of shame. It can look like getting mad when the other person is upset. It can look like trying to control your partner's behavior. It can look like not taking accountability. So I want to share some examples of helpful emotional boundaries. Some examples. So a few here. I can recognize where my experience ends and where my partner's begins. So looking back to that exercise that we did just a few minutes ago, how much of that exercise did your partner experience? They experienced their own emotional experience, right? They did not experience yours. So you had very separate experiences. So being able to recognize that you do not share the same experience is an example of a healthy emotional boundary or recognition of a boundary. Another one, I will allow my partner space to feel their emotions without making it about me. I will work to understand and stay with my own experience rather than trying to manage or control my spouse's behavior. It's very common for people from their past to learn that the way that they are okay in this world is by making sure things outside of them are okay. And what ends up happening is that they ignore their internal experience and they focus on making sure everything outside of them is okay. You know, they manage the chaos outside of them to feel better. But what works better is being able to stay with your own internal experience rather than trying to manage outside of you. And that brings a lot of inner peace, but it also allows people to have their own emotional space as well. So I can ask for space to process my own feelings. If you feel like you don't have space, it's okay to ask for space. And I can take responsibility for my emotional process, including how my behavior affects my partner, right? So remember in that process that the action tendency is part of the emotional process. And so what I choose to do to manage and cope with my emotions ultimately affects my partner. And so taking responsibility for that is very helpful. I will not ignore my emotional experience to keep the peace. That's common when people, don't want to rock the boat, that they just ignore what's going on for them to keep the peace in the relationship. That will perpetuate negative cycles. It will serve the couple, even if it feels like it will. And because I care about us, I am willing to learn how we impact each other and what we can do as a team to remain connected in the face of distress. So being able to understand that we're on a team here. This is not you versus me. This is how can we as a team better understand our emotional processes and how they affect each other. And then as a team, be able to figure out what to do in that process. Okay, I love this quote. You don't have to take off your armor until it feels safe, but you do have to put down your weapons. So what this means is that it makes sense that we want to self-protect, right? It's hardwired in us. But that is different than weaponizing things to hurt people when we are hurting. So when you create boundaries, you are determining in part what is and what is not okay in your relationship. So I want to highlight these specific behaviors and talk about that these specific behaviors we know do not have a place in a relationship with healthy boundaries. So these behaviors are very damaging to relationships and are not okay. Nagging, criticism, blaming, personal attacks, stonewalling, name calling, sarcasm, mocking. These do not have a place. And so when you are determining better emotional boundaries in your relationship, this is a very clear one, right? That these do not have a place. It does not provide safety, and boundaries provide safety. If you are nagging, criticizing, blaming, any of these things, stonewalling, it immediately takes away that sense of safety from the relationship. Okay, so let's come back to Taylor and Tina. So this is just a little bit kind of where they could go differently to as they have better healthy emotional boundaries, what this cycle can look like. So we're gonna start with Taylor. So Taylor has the same trigger, right? He is triggered when his partner uses a critical tone. Again, he still has the same history. He's sensitive to criticism because of what happened with him and his mom. He still has these attachment fears of not being ultimately accepted by his partner and disappointing his partner. And even this belief, I can't get anything right. So what does he do? This is where things start shifting a little bit. So rather than disengaging and using his phone as a way of escape, he notices that he feels triggered, right? So the change here is the turning to the partner and sharing, ouch, I notice that hurts when you use that tone. I wonder what's going on for us. So this is where we turn to Tina and we see how she responds. So because of his coping behavior is different, Tina feels the trigger is different, right? She's a little surprised about what they shared. And she's a little bit hurt since it was not her intention. However, her nervous system response is a little bit different as well. She's open and curious and slightly defended. She's not immediately thrown into a place of being reminded of the abandonment with her dad. You know, still maybe not as afraid of abandonment because her partner is engaged with her. He's not going away from her, and remains wanting to talk about, you know, what I wonder what's going on for us. So the story, rather than my partner doesn't care, the story is now my spouse is invested in us and we are in this together. And of course, her behavior is different because the cycle is different. So at this point, she can focus on her partner's pain rather than making it about her. So she can respond, tell me more, what's happening for you? So she doesn't go to that same critical place. So you can see how Taylor chooses to manage, or how he works with his emotional process. He's able to change that negative cycle that's so common between the two of them. Now, I want to show you what it can look like on the other side. So same couple. So because Tina does not cope by criticism, Taylor does not hear criticism. However, it may still signal a little bit of trouble for him, right? And so actually, let's go over to Tina's side. So partner checks his phone. She's still feeling sensitive, being ignored, you know, her father not being present, and the fear of not being understood. She's believing my spouse doesn't care. So she copes differently, right? Last time we talked about how Taylor was coping differently. So she copes differently. She notices feelings in the story. She notices what's going on for her. That's the first step. And then she gets in touch of what's driving the anxiety, the fear of losing her partner, being ignored. And when she understands what's going on with her a little bit more, she chooses to share, when you're on your phone, I notice I feel anxious and old stuff about my dad starts coming up. Can we talk about it? So she copes by leaning in. She copes by opening up and sharing what's going on for her. But before that, she has this awareness of what's going on with her, right? And so the cue is different. Taylor does not hear criticism, but he might still have a little bit of a signal going on saying, uh-oh, am I in trouble here? Am I disappointing my partner? So he kind of has a couple things going on. His alarm system is on alert, and at the same time, he wants to help Tina. And so he's slightly nervous that maybe his partner is upset with him. But the thoughts in the story change a little bit, right? Rather than I I'm not enough for my partner, Tina's asking him for help, right? She's leaning in, which helps Taylor believe that his partner needs him. And that's very different than not being enough for his partner. So Taylor copes differently as well. He acknowledges both the slight apprehension as well as the desire to help and responds, I do want to hear about what's happening for you. And I sense a little anxiety coming up for me too. Can we talk about it in 20 minutes? I just want to take a walk first, so that he can kind of maybe take some time to understand what's going on for him. So boundaries open space for compassion. So it might sound paradoxical that boundaries, which inherently imply distance, are an essential element for closeness, right? But that's because boundaries open space for love and empathy. Boundaries create a container for us to hold space for our partner's pain and experience. If we don't have, so the question is for you, how big is your container? How much space do you feel like you can hold for your partner's pain and experience separate from you? If it feels small, your container might be full from you trying to manage their stuff for them. That might be one reason why you don't have much space to offer, or trying to fix it rather than trusting that they can fix it with your support. So keep in mind that you do not need to solve your partner's pain. What we need from our partners is a witness, somebody to witness our struggle. Boundaries separate you enough so that you can witness your partner's struggle and not carry it for them. So Brene Brown talks about how boundaries are a prerequisite for compassion and empathy. So this just what I've been talking about. And in her HBO special that I watched recently, I really loved how she talked about empathy. Often we think empathy is like trying to walk in somebody's shoes or trying to put yourself in somebody else's place. But what we're understanding is that empathy is not trying to walk in someone else's shoes, actually, but it's actually listening to their experience and believing them, even if it contradicts your own. Okay, so I want to talk about ways now to co-regulate with your partner. So with RAIN, that's a really great experience or exercise to use when you're just regulating with yourself, because you call on your higher self to connect with, or a higher power to connect with. Now, there are a lot of ways to regulate with your partner, and I've listed some here, but I think one of the most powerful ways to kind of sense what will work for you and your partner is through this exercise. So I want you to close your eyes again, I invite you to close your eyes. And this time, focus on slowing down your exhales. And that'll bring a natural relaxation. And then I want you to imagine being with your spouse and feeling calm and safe with them. And then I want you to just notice what's happening in this scene. Take some time here. Notice how you feel in your body. What does calm and safe feel like in your body? Now check in with your 5 senses. What do you see? What do you hear? Taste, touch, and smell. Now I'll invite you to open your eyes. And again, if you are with your significant other, you can turn and share your experience with them. What I want you to share is like, where were you in this scene? And what were you doing? What words were being said? Was there touch? Were you looking at each other? Yeah, this will give you some really great ideas of how to recreate safe regulatory experiences together. And if you don't have your significant other with you, you can take a minute or so to just jot down some key themes of what allowed you, what was the context around feeling safe with your partner. Okay. All right, so we will move into the Q&A. I'll stop sharing. This is just a quick reminder that please fill out the survey that pops up afterward. So, okay. Great. Okay, somebody's asking if there's a way to access these slides. Camilla, I believe you will be sending a link to this to people that have registered.
Yes, everybody who registered for this webinar will get a link tomorrow to the recording, so you can go back and review the slides.
Great. Okay. If there are no questions, I would love to hear, as your questions are kind of forming, I would just love to hear what those exercises were like to do. If anybody is willing to share. Okay. Okay, so a question here. Are you suggesting we should go to those safe experiences when we are in a moment of anger? Yeah, so anger, you know, as I was kind of talking about flipping the lid, it is possible that when you are in a, you know, more of a rageful anger, that you're going to need to take some time to regulate through your body. So I would suggest burning off some of that anger through some sort of physical outlet before engaging. And I would recommend taking some sort of a time out from your spouse to do some of that regulation before trying to engage in those co-regulating exercises. Okay. Okay, somebody says it's a great way to connect to my wife. Okay. The experiences were good for me. Lots coming in all at once. I was surprised to see us at the beach. We don't live by a beach, but I discovered there were no distractions and we were alone. And I heard the waves and our laughter. Wonderful. Yeah. My husband is at work and couldn't join, but we co-regulate with a long morning hug every day. Wonderful. Very helpful to be able to communicate with spouse and others. We were alone and I was reminded how much I do like him and how grounded I feel when he is near me. So good. Yeah. So what happens, this kind of methodology can probably be used outside of marriage as well. Absolutely. All of this is so applicable to, all of our relationships. So parenting, at work, parents. Yep. Yeah. So a response that spouse got mad triggered and now it's not so well. How can we work together again? So this is probably an opportunity to take a time out apart from each other and work on getting back to that grounded space individually. Sometimes these things can bring up triggers, and so your experience is very normal. So I would say take at least 20 minutes apart. Our bodies, when we get triggered, that physiological response takes often at least 20 minutes to come back out of that trigger into a safe space. Actually, they were good for me. I have a hard time expressing. Yeah, somebody said I enjoyed the second one and found my outcome a little more intriguing than I thought. Yeah, sometimes we are a little bit surprised when we kind of dive in. And sometimes it can feel a little bit choreographed, but then we dive in and we find things that are helpful. Yeah. I'm grateful for these skills, useful not just for marriage, but any relationship. Many of us are around coworkers more than our family members. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. What if you have a hard time recognizing your feelings? Yeah. So I'll just kind of give a personal note here. So a number of years ago when I was in therapy myself, my therapist just asked me, where do you feel that in your body? And I just was so confused by the question. I had no idea that you even felt emotions in your body. And so what I would say is to those that have a hard time recognizing your feelings is that it may take some time to just open your awareness to what's going on. So I would highly recommend doing, involving yourself in some sort of meditation practice, in a structured practice where you specifically focus on reconnecting to body sensations. And then at that point, when you have the sensations, you can start adding language and you can start using descriptions about them. You can start finding the words that fit the experience. But often it's that disconnection between the mind and body that's so difficult for people. Yeah. Okay. Can you talk more about compassion for the other person? I'm not quite sure what kind of they're looking for. But often when we are not regulated, we do not have access to compassion for others because we are stuck in a survival state. It's all about self-preservation. And so the more regulated you are, the more space you have to feel compassion and empathy and understanding for your partner. Yeah, there's also, I'll just kind of tacking on to the, building a meditation practice, using a metta practice, which is focused on creating compassion, self-compassion, as well as building compassion for others, including those most important relationships in our life can be a really helpful practice. If that's something that you struggle with, if you have a hard time, offering compassion to yourself, to other people, that having a meditation practice can be very helpful. Okay. All right, Camilla, I'm not seeing many more coming in. Does this feel like a good place to stop?
Yes, if there are no more questions, we can go ahead and wrap up just a few minutes early. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure we're all good here. Okay, thank you so much for this awesome presentation. This was just wonderful, and I learned a lot. Oh, we're getting a bunch of thank yous in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us and participating. We love to see you here, and I'll make sure that you all get a link to the recording so you can share it with friends and review it again. And you can look at past archive webinars for what we've got. Lots of different topics, and we look forward to seeing you at future webinars as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. See ya, everyone. Have a great evening.